Welcome back. So I've decided to make individual videos for Nikon, Canon, and Sony just because the Nikon one ended up being so long. So today we're going to take a look at a Canon DSLR, and this is a Rebel. This is a beginner's camera. Now, the first thing that we have here is not a whole lot of stuff on the front of this camera. Right here, this little button here is for red eye reduction. And if you were to use your self timer, it would blink to tell you when the camera is about to take a photo. This is your lens mount here. The little red dot is there's a dot on your lens and you line those up, and that's how you insert, and then you would twist your camera. Down here is the lens release button. And up here is your shutter button. Now your shutter button is used for three different things. One is to take a picture. Two is to initiate the meter and start the camera meter. And the third would be to autofocus. Now, for those of you who are new to photography and aren't used to using any button for autofocus, I would suggest you switch it to rear focus or back button focus, whichever one you prefer to call it. It's just a better way to use a camera. There's no reason that you have to, but it's just a good suggestion. All right, this is the right side of the camera, and right here we can see this is where you attach your camera strip, and right here is going to be where you insert your memory cards. This is going to be the left side of the camera here. This is going to be the other side for your camera strap. This is going to be for a remote trigger to release your camera. This is going to be USB and for HDMI. All right, so this is the back of the camera, and we're going to start up here on the top, and this is your hot shoe. Hot shoe is where you would slide in an external flash. Now, this camera does have a pop-up flash. I don't think pop-up flashes are really worthwhile, and they don't really benefit you. They don't really have enough power to do too much, and you really can't control the direction of the flash. But it does have a pop-up flash, so if you don't put one on, it will activate it. Next thing that we have here is your eyepiece. Now, note, this part actually slides up and off. You'll see a lot of people that put gaffers tape up here to hold that on. So if you do have one that gets loose and slides off really easy, just put a piece of gaffers tape up there to hold that. And right here is your diopter. This is for plus or minus. Basically what a diopter does, some people wear glasses and they don't have strong prescriptions, and it's difficult to look through your camera with your glasses on. A diopter allows you to correct for your vision. Basically, you're going to take your glasses off, look through here, focus on something, and then you need to adjust your diopter. And then whenever it looks the most in focus or the most clear, that's where you want to set it. Once again, if you do set it, this button is easy to accidentally hit. I do it all the time. Put a little piece of gaffer's tape there, and that will hold that in place. Next thing that we have down here is our LCD. So this is where all the information on any of these buttons will be displayed. This button right here is either for live view or video recording. So if you want live view, and live view just previews what you see through here on the back of your camera. However, if you're new to photography, learn to use the eyepiece. Don't view your images back here on there. It's a much better option to learn to use your viewfinder, whether it's optical or electronic. Next thing that we have here is your AV button. And what this AV button means is on your camera up here on Canon on the top, on a Canon camera, the way you adjust your shutter and your aperture is by moving this dial. By default, this dial will control your shutter speed. When you want to adjust your aperture, you need to press this button in, and then when you slide that dial that was up there, then it will control your aperture. So all basic cameras have this, where you kind of have one kind of main dial and you have to hit a button to control the aperture. Not a big fan of it. On the higher end cameras, I'll show you here in just a little bit, you'll actually have two completely different buttons, one to adjust the shutter speed and one to adjust your aperture. This button can also be used for multiple options. So if you're displaying your images, so you hit play to display your image on the back of here and you wanted to delete something, this button would also be a delete. It also activates as an exposure compensation dial. So it would allow you to automatically go plus or minus in your exposure. The next button we have here is display. Pressing this is going to show some specific information on this viewfinder. The next button is this Q. This is your quick control button. So basically, if you press this, it's going to allow you quick access to a menu that would pop up here so you can change your white balance, your ISO, and things like that. You can also change your ISO by pressing this button. This is a great option. You press this button, ISO pops up. You would use the dial up there to adjust your ISO, and then you could hit set to set it. Here you control your autofocus modes. So you're going to have a couple different ones. You're going to have manual, so you could set it to manual, so there is no autofocus. You can set it to single continuous, meaning that the camera will focus until it thinks it's in focus, and then it will stop focusing. Now, the problem with this is it doesn't track moving subjects. So if you're playing soccer or sports, you want it to constantly keep in focus. You need to switch it to autofocus, and it's usually C, which is continuous. It would be AF-C, and that would continuously autofocus. And usually that's my suggestion for people to just go ahead and put it on that. WB stands for white balance. This is going to allow you to white balance your camera. I set mine on auto. I do all my white balancing in post-production because I shoot RAW. Here you can use this to set your shutter. You can set this to every time you press the shutter release button, it only takes 1 picture. It takes continuous amount of pictures. So if you were to hold the button down, it would go click, 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 click until it couldn't take photos anymore, or to set it up to use the timer mode. Menu is going to bring up your menu here and allow you to configure your camera however you want. This is your play button. So after you take an image, you can hit play and it will display the image that you just took here. If you want to go backwards through your images, you can use these buttons to toggle left and right. And this is really backwards or forwards. Once you have your image up, if you need to zoom in, you have some magnification buttons. So you could magnify with the plus or demagnify with the minus. Now these buttons also do a couple of other things. This one is important. So before, when I talked about rear or back button focus, you can go into your menu and configure your camera to change the way it works. And you can control this to make this your autofocus button, in which you would hit it with your thumb. And what that allows you to do is whenever you want to autofocus, you press the button in. Whenever you want to stop autofocusing, you let go of it. It gives you an independent control. It makes focusing a little bit more accurate. Down here, we have this. This is for Wi-Fi. And this is kind of a little info button. Basically, if your camera is writing images to your card, it's going to blink. Up here, we have some dials, and we're going to take a look at those right now. And the last view that we see here is the top view of the camera. And once again, this is your hot shoe. This is going to be a pop-up flash. We can easily see the camera strap holders. And the main thing that we have here is what's called the command dial. Now, this is going to allow you to set your camera in a variety of different modes. Now, in this series, we're basically going to be focused on the M right here. That stands for manual, in which you have full control of your camera. AV stands for aperture priority, meaning that you set the aperture. The camera will set the ISO and the shutter speed. TV means shutter priority, meaning that you set the shutter speed and the camera is going to set the aperture and the ISO. Program is a fully automatic mode. Automatic is another automatic mode. And then you have a video recording mode right there and some automatic modes. So you have like portrait and running and backlit and whatever you want to do. These modes kind of help let the camera know what type of subject you're photographing, so it can automatically set the best preferences or adjustments for that scene. For instance, when you take a picture of someone running, you need a fast shutter speed. And this is going to tell the camera, hey, you need to make sure that you have a fast enough shutter speed to stop action, and the camera will automatically know to do that. Now in this case, we're basically only going to be using M, so you're going to slide this M until it lines up with this little line over here. This is your flash button. If you press the little flash button, your flash is automatically going to pop up. Over here we have a microphone. Those little holes there are for your camera's video microphone. You can see right here, these were the two buttons that we saw before. This is the button that I was suggesting that you use for autofocus. And this button right here also allows you to adjust your focal point on your camera. So I have a separate video that really goes over this, but basically when you're looking through your viewfinder, you can adjust or set your focus points in a variety of different ways. If you set it to pinpoint, where it's just one of those little squares, if you press this and then move your dial around, you can adjust that point to different locations. Now, the last thing that we're going to take a look at real quick, this is a Canon 5D Mark IV, and you'll see that the buttons are all different. What I want to stress in this, as you move up and get into kind of intermediate and professional cameras, before when you wanted to change the aperture, you kind of had to hold one button and then move this dial up here. On this camera, this controls your aperture. So this is your shutter speed and this is your aperture. Nikon usually has some buttons here that you do it. But any pro or intermediate camera is going to have two completely different buttons. One's going to allow you to adjust the shutter and one's going to allow you to address the aperture. This just makes it a whole lot quicker and easier to do. Well, if you found this video helpful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. If you have any comments or questions, you can leave those below. And as always, don't forget to subscribe.